I find it very fun to continue to stack both gold and silver because I know what the true value of both of them are, and it's a bargain. So I like a good sale. And if you like a good sale, you accumulate. Why do you think all of these central banks and all of the money managers and the 1% are accumulating gold?
Hey guys, this exclusive interview is brought to you by our patrons and in part by Stem Enhance Ultra. Stem cells are your body's natural healing system. You get a cut on your finger one day and the next day it heals. How does that happen? It's your body's stem cells at work. Sad part is by age 65, you've lost 90% of your adult stem cells, but now you may be able to boost stem cell levels naturally within an hour by 30% with a new plant-based capsule. Stem Enhance Ultra assists the body's inherent ability for long-term self-renewal by supporting the body's natural release of bone marrow stem cells. Everyone's chemistry is different, but for many, this produces a variety of benefits to help reduce the effects of aging. The product comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee, so visit their website at stemup.com. That's stemup.com. I'll leave the link below this video. Hey friends, Sean from SGT Report here with a very important economic and precious metals update with our friend Lynette Zang from ITM Trading. We've got so much to talk about. Let's begin. Lynette, welcome.
Oh, it's always great to be here, and you're right. There is a lot going on right now.
Well, there sure is, and you know what? Truth is under attack. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that everything is going to be based upon whoever is controlling it. So the fact that YouTube and Facebook can control what is actually shown is pretty significant because they're the ones that determine what's truth and what's okay to be shown.
Yeah, Big Brother on steroids. It's an electronic book burning over there on Amazon, on Twitter, essentially. They're banning and blocking people. On YouTube, they've changed their algorithms. Have you used Google lately? It will not serve up the results you're looking for, Lynette. It gives you the results they want you to read.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, they have so much data on you anymore, and they talk about all of this customization when in reality what it does is it's more about isolation and nudging, trying to get you to go in the direction they want you to go in. So it's perception management, as you said, on steroids, no doubt.
Yeah, I recently did a video interview with my friend Corey Lynn from CoreyDiggs.com, and it was about the Clintons and their associates' connections to human trafficking, and that one was immediately demonetized, and I had them do a manual review, and it was confirmed by manual review, not suitable for most advertisers. So it begs the question, maybe YouTube thinks advertisers are only trying to appeal to pedophiles. I mean, that's really what you come down to at the end of the day. They will not allow advertising on anything too truthy. But the things we talk about are equally truthy. I guess in the interest of having a little humor here, I want to play a tune from one of my favorite bands from college, The Smiths, after I ask this question. $2.50, Lynette, still buys a gallon of gas, or a decent loaf of bread, or 2 cartons of eggs, or a grande dark roast with cream at Starbucks. Inflation in consumables is being kept at bay in the United States. Where is the inflation? Now here comes the song. Is it only in asset prices?
It is in fiat asset prices that have been targeted, because I've really been doing some digging, and I came across this neighbor paper on collateral and how since the crisis, what really caused the eruption in 2008 was the loss of liquidity into this very short-term paper and the mismatch between the underlying collateral. And the result has been, since 2008, that the whole system has morphed into this very short-term collateral, which has a tendency to run with so many mismatches in terms of maturity, whether it's a short-term interest rate derivative instrument that's tied to a longer-term bond, so you have that mismatch in maturity, or even in liquidity mismatch, which is way, way, way more dangerous in that you have, for example, REITs, which on the system, you can buy and sell like that at this moment. That's not always going to be true, but at this moment you can. However, the valuations or the properties that are underlying, how long does it take to sell a house or a shopping mall, especially with this massive exodus continuing and the loss of traffic into the shopping malls? So the whole system is now based on this very, very short-term wholesale funding model, but life isn't all short-term. And they want you to keep your money in there long-term when everything is based on short-term. Sounds like a crisis waiting to happen to me.
Yeah, and meanwhile, we have the president tweeting out that if the Fed had done its job properly, which it has not, the stock market would have been up 5,000 to 10,000 additional points, and GDP would have been well over 4% instead of 3% with almost no inflation, ... Quantitative tightening was a killer, should have done exactly the opposite. President Trump is a very smart guy. Do you think for a minute he doesn't understand the things that you just spoke about? I wonder why he needs to prop up the stock market as the beacon for all that is healthful about the U.S. economy, because it's not. Most people aren't participating in the stock market.
Right. However, number one, I do think he understands that everything is based on this very short-term wholesale funding property. But I also think that he knows that he's the one that is most likely to usher in the new currency and the whole new financial system. And I really do think if you know you're going to declare bankruptcy and you get some new credit cards in the mail, what do? People would have a tendency to go and just spend on those credit cards because they know that they're going to declare bankruptcy anyway. So I think that because, I mean, who doesn't know? It's not just this is late stage. The system is irreparably broken and it has to transition. It has to go into a new system because they don't have any tools left. And what we've got going on when he calls for, basically lots more QE, which was originally an experimental program and temporary. Now it's to be used to just game the system even more because the stock markets, the bond markets, they're the biggest part of the economy. They are I don't know exactly what the numbers are, but all of the transactions, these short-term transactions that take place in the global markets, I mean, that's the new scorecard because that's the biggest part of the economy.
Yeah.
So that's why it matters. And, frankly, if they continue on with the QT, which clearly they are, does that really mean that things have gotten better for the normal person? No, this is all about wealth transfer and risk transfer. And all of the inflation has gone into these instruments and these assets. But let me take you back to the collateral, because when there is an unlimited supply of something and it's cheap, free, and easy to get, what value does it really have when there's a crisis? It's things that are scarce and rare that have intrinsic value. That's where the real value in these markets lie, is in the underlying. So gold and oil and real energy and real products and things that people need to use every day. Instead, they'll take your student debt, they'll take your credit card debt, your auto debt, whatever other kind of debt that they come up with, and they can turn that into a package and sell it back to you. And what's the value of your debt if you can't pay that debt? At what point, when you can no longer roll that debt over or meet those interest payments, what's the value of that collateral? And that's throughout the whole system. Pension plans, mutual funds, annuity, everything. It's all integrated into this interconnected, very short-term collateral pieces that are based on collateral that is losing value, because the more debt you take on, the harder it is for you to pay that debt if your income does not keep pace with the increase in your payments. that make sense?
Yeah.
It's a powder keg.
Yeah. Well, and what I was driving at when I said most people aren't taking part in the stock market, of course, people have IRAs and 401ks, but the little guy doesn't have 1,000 shares of Amazon, and the big guys have tens of thousands of shares of Amazon. So with that in mind,
Add a little something in with that, Sean.
yeah,
And the big guys are not paying the same level of fees that the little guys are paying, who are paying many multiple layers of fees that are hidden from them. So there's a different level of participation in these markets between a JP Morgan and a normal person making a contribution to their 401k.
right. Right. Okay. Well, then let's just read this. This is from Jesse Colombo from realinvestmentadvice.com. And he says, the people who believe in the low inflation myth are being fooled by the fact that inflation in this unusual central bank driven economic cycle is concentrated in asset prices rather than in consumer prices. That kind of brings us right back to where we began because, again, that $2.50 will still buy 2 cartons of eggs or a gallon of gas. And thank God, because I don't want us to turn into Venezuela. But what he writes in this piece is that asset prices have been acting like a relief valve for inflationary pressures. So that gets us right back to this stock market bubble. And God bless our president. You know, he knows this system needs to continue if we're all to survive and put food on our tables, but it can't continue like this forever. That's the problem. And that's the reason for having conversations like this. You know, because people engage their normalcy bias. Most people alive in this country have never lived through a hyperinflationary depression.
Right.
Is that coming? Is that coming, or stop me, have you heard this one before?
I see no way around it. I see no way around it because they're out of, the central banks are out of tools. So what's coming next? Something like modern money theory, where they could just print any amount and completely monetize whatever programs that they want to. That how much value does that fiat money have when they can print it, even not associated with debt? You know, it doesn't have any value. So these markets can go up, but the dollar value, what they're created from, that you can only convert it back into, that value is going down. So what's the value of your labor? Because that's what you're working for. That's what you're trying to save. That's what you're trying to invest. So they can make the stock market look like, and really, today was really the first day I noticed on CNBC where they started to talk about melt up. Because look, globally, the central banks are all committed to this easy money policy because they tried it the other way and nobody would have it. The markets wouldn't have it. So you're going to see a lot more QE. You're going to see the interest rates down, but it's like pushing on a string. It doesn't work anymore. There have been lots of studies that have shown that the more QE, the longer they held interest rates at zero, the less impact all of their programs actually had. And as of the last quarter, I just did this the other day, pulled up this graph, but I believe it was in the very last quarter. So either the last quarter 2018 or the first quarter 2019. I can't remember. It's not in front of me, but it's one of those. That it actually had, the free money globally actually had a negative impact. So what does that mean? If you're doing more of the same thing, you're going to get the same results, which is just that fiat money and tangible assets inflate, but the value of which they're created from, that you can only convert it back into, is losing value even more quickly until zero. Because the only reason it has value now is because we all agree to work for it and use it as our tool of barter and try to invest it.
Right.
Ridiculous.
Well, the central banks don't much care for the fiat. They're hoarding physical gold like never seen since probably around 1970.
Since Bretton Woods. It actually goes back that far, when the US dollar took over as the world reserve currency and promised to keep the dollar's value fixed at 35 to an ounce of gold. That was the last time that they've been accumulating at these levels. And I'll tell you something else that I found really interesting lately. I don't know if you've noticed this, but there is so much news on gold that's coming out in mainstream media. There's something that's going on. I'm not used to finding that many mainstream articles on gold accumulation, money managers following central bankers, accumulation of gold, and lots of others. You know, Italy, their populist government now looking to repatriate their gold, because who really owns it? The central bank or the people? And if the people get their hands on it, what are they going to do with it? Are they going to understand that they could actually break away from the European Union and create their own money based on gold after they hyperinflate and pay off the debt with the currency that means nothing? I mean, there's a lot that's going on in the gold market. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating to see this, because that's all about awareness, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And we need to be aware, though, of what the money masters want. Well, you know, how are they trying to steer humanity? Because sooner or later, these stories end badly for the people. Fiat currencies can't go on forever. So we've got this guy, this former United Nations Undersecretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, evidently, calling for a one world currency. The only way they can get away with that, though, is if people were still sound asleep and they could get people to, for instance, in the EU, willingly give up all of their rights to unelected bureaucrats in Brussels and just go quietly into this good night. But that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing the yellow vests. Oh, by the way, did you see the Notre Dame on fire? And there's video. Get this. There's video now that has emerged of a guy up in one of those towers in a yellow vest and a white helmet walking across. So now people are asking the question, was this thing done deliberately, and will it be blamed on the yellow vests? But we got to keep our eyes on all of this stuff, because the yellow vests are very important. It represents a seismic shift in human consciousness. People do not want to abdicate their rights. They do not want to be ruled by unelected bureaucrats in Brussels. We've got Brexit. It continues to be pushed and delayed by Theresa May, a traitor to her people, because I think, and I just had an interesting conversation with Graham Moore, who lives in the UK, who's an activist, and the Queen, being part of this New World Order global system, is willing to push her people in the direction of a one world global government in a one world currency. And but I think they can only get that if people are willing to accept it. And I don't think any of us are willing to accept it, Lynette.
Well, that's at this point. But imagine if you are freaking out, look at 2008 and put that on steroids, and look at Venezuela, put all of that together. And if that's what's happening to the population, and the IMF with their SDR, which is, I mean, that is the most ready to take over as a one world global currency, being composed of a variety of currencies, you know, which they can totally include all of the currencies on the planet in that basket. That's not a big deal. So when people are completely freaked out because the grocery store shelves are bad and the hyperinflation is eroding and they can't get their food, they can't get their meds, there's, you know, I mean, how likely are they to say, save me, okay, if you say so?
And that's what I fear.
That's my concern.
Yeah, my concern too. I mean, can you imagine the inner cities, the big mega cities in this country, you know, going dark like what we've seen in Venezuela? Now, I think a lot of what we've seen in Venezuela is deliberately being done. I think that there's a lot of stuff being done to try to push that situation over the cliff. But that's the same type of stuff these globalist powers, I think George Soros, would be eager to do to us. So it could happen here.
Well, you know what's quite interesting in that same neighbor paper that I referred to in the beginning, they discuss the fact that central banks will push an economy into a recession, though what we've got coming is way more than a recession, but will purposely, and shocker, I've seen enough research to know that this is a fact, where they will push an economy into a recession to blow off some of that excess leverage, the excess garbage that's in the system. That's what they were trying to do with tightening up, was to push us over. So now we've got the inverted yield curve here, but you know, this is happening globally, which indicates that we've got a recession. And no, it's not fixed yet. Even if the yield curve in this country were to not be inverted anymore, which they could frankly control that if they really, really wanted to, perhaps. Maybe they can't. Maybe that's an indication that they're actually losing control because it's been inverted since December 4th, even though they never say that because they're only looking at this narrow window. But the 2 and the 5 year, it's been inverted since December 4th. That hasn't changed.
Right.
So, are they trying to push us into this crisis? I think so. I definitely think so. Because the system doesn't work anymore. What tools do they have to manage inflation, or interest rates and debt levels? Well, the interest rates can't move much past zero, and in many cases, they're still quite negative. And not only that, but the debt levels are not payable. So this 10 years that they had, or 11 years that they had to deleverage with interest rates down at zero, did corporations or governments do that? No, they didn't do that. They took on more debt because they could service, and they held wages down, so they could service all of this additional debt for the same amount that they were paying. And we have a debt wall that's looming large in front of us, where all of this debt is either going to have to be rolled over, reset, or paid, but they aren't making enough money to do any one of those things. So what we've got is what's called the zombification of the corporate world, because can they afford to have Deutsche Bank go bankrupt? No,
Nope.
they're sitting on too many derivatives. So they keep it alive because they're afraid of the outcome until maybe they're ready for the outcome.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting when we think about debt, and we think about the situation in this country with, $21 trillion in debt. It's the unfunded entitlements that are the elephant in the room. And Greenspan, who I don't usually quote, is right when he says, economic growth won't last as the U.S. labors under the burden of growing entitlement programs. Now, who is it in the political sphere who wants those entitlement programs to grow? Who is it in the political sphere who wants open borders and endless immigration? It's the people aligned with people like George Soros. It's the people sitting on the left. It's the Democrats. They are truly traitors to this country because we're already under a burden of debt that is unrepayable, and they want it only to increase. I mean, these people really are ideologically opposed to freedom and liberty, aren't they?
Right. Because if there is a big enough crisis, how scared are the people? And when people are hungry and hopeless, well, they do things they wouldn't normally do, but they also accept things they wouldn't normally accept.
That's right.
And that is really much about what my work is about, and what your work is about, is to open up people's eyes, because presumably, and I don't really know if this is true or not, but they say that if you can get 3% of the population to adopt something, that's kind of the tipping point, and then you get more and more and more adoption.
Yeah. Yeah, problem, reaction, solution. And the solution to hyperinflation will be, oh, well, we'll just jump over to this one world currency. That's what they wanted. That was the plan. And the reason I do have some hope is because of the yellow vests, and because the witch didn't win. She couldn't get into the White House, and they don't have a backup plan. And people are waking up, and that's the good news. Let me ask you about Precious.
Frankly, that's how Trump got elected too.
Oh, I know.
This is a global populist movement where people have gotten so tired of that income inequality, where you have the average CEO making over 300 times what their employees make. This is at the highest level that it was since 1928, before the markets crashed. And people don't like that. And so, think about that, because that was the kickoff. And that was also by design as a wealth transfer mechanism. That's what this whole thing is.
Right.
And we've been losing ground ever since.
Yeah, but people are waking up to these bankrupt talking points of the left too, like diversity is our strength and nationalism is Nazism. I mean, all of this is preposterous. If you care about your nation, I mean, we all have front doors with locks on them. Why is that? why don't we just let the world come into our homes? I mean, you have to have borders, you have to have locks, and you have to have law if you want to have a country. And people are waking up to that. People in the EU are waking up to that. Thank God. All right. I want to ask you about precious metals because
Yeah.
I've done I've done some soul searching here as it relates to silver and gold. They're not that fun to buy anymore because they're capped and they're manipulated. But having said that, silver is a lot more fun to buy than gold because most people don't have expendable income of $1,300 to get an ounce of gold. But for a tenth of that, instead of getting a tenth of an ounce of gold, which isn't very fun because it's so darn little, it feels like you didn't buy anything. For $130, you can get 8 ounces of silver at $16 an ounce. And right now, I think silver's below 15. So do we keep stacking silver, or is this just another case of stop me? Have we heard this one before? Maybe it's time to stop talking about silver.
No, let's stop and think about what I said, what we talked about in the very beginning of this program, where it really is all about collateral and the value of collateral. And I have to say, I find it very fun to continue to stack both gold and silver because I do not believe, I know what the true value of both of them are, and it's a bargain. So I like a good sale. And if you like a good sale, you accumulate. The silver gold kind of debate has been going on for a really long time, but they both have different functions. And so even though that tenth of an ounce of gold looks kind of little, the reality is, and I'd have to do some calculations from wherever you are, but that tenth of an ounce of gold will enable you to pay your property taxes. No matter how high those property taxes go, they will hold that value. And since that is the metal that they do the reset against, that's why it's the primary currency metal. That's what they do the reset against. You need to have a foundation of gold. You have to have both. You have to have both. It's not one or the other. Silver is a whole lot easier to accumulate because it is so cheap, but it is harder to use inside. Like, okay, let me back up to move forward. Because I always look at patterns, and I've been studying currencies since 1987, what I see is a repeatable pattern in a currency's life cycle. And so I've created the strategy for myself based upon all of those repeatable patterns. So whatever it is that you're positioning into, whether it's gold or silver, it really shouldn't be because one's cheaper than the other in terms of fiat at this moment in time. It should be, what is it that I need to accomplish? Do I need to accomplish that day-to-day barterability so that I can buy my food and my water and my energy and pay my property taxes? And if I have any medical issues, that I can make sure that I get the medicine and the care that I need? Because if you are dependent on the government for any of these things, good luck to you. You're going to be, you know what.
Right.
So you look at what is it that I'm trying to accomplish. And for me, silver and those fractional pieces of gold are about that barterability, that day-to-day living. But you got to understand that when you're using your silver and gold for day-to-day living, you're also using up your principal. So you need to have the ability to recoup that principal, as well as any taxes, any fees, any costs associated with, you know, what your, maybe you've got a bunch of money in an IRA or 401k and you're going to have taxes, or they're going to charge you on an annuity. Well, you want to recuperate that. So gold, and there's all different kinds to do all these different things, but gold is about recuperating that. And it is also about holding large amounts of wealth in an itty bitty package that you can then convert when those opportunities present into that income producing asset. So it's not one or the other. For me, it's always about function. What am I trying to accomplish? What do I have to work with to get that done? And then what's going to be the best tool to make that happen?
Right.
But in either case, because of all of that suppression, because rising gold price is an indication of a failing currency. So you take advantage of it. Why do you think all of these central banks and all of the money managers and the 1% are accumulating gold? They know it's undervalued.
Right.
Look at the cup formation, even in the manipulated spot market. We've got a gorgeous cup inside of a larger cup that is forming right now. There will be a breakout. I'm sure we'll see it this year. I mean, that's not something that's within my control, but I'm looking at the underlying. And so you got to have both. And it's nice to be able to buy gold in 1/10 of an ounce or 1/4 of an ounce, because that's affordable. But it's got to be a properly diversified portfolio. And for me, it's always about function. What am I trying to accomplish? What's the best tool for the job?
Right. Maybe the way to do it then is for folks to just buy the silver to gold ratio. For every 80 ounces of silver you buy, you should save up money and buy 1 ounce of gold. That might be one way to do it. Let me.
Certainly, I mean, there's a number of ways, and no matter what you do, if you are accumulating real intrinsic value, which you are in the physical markets, because there's such a broad market for them, then maybe it won't be exactly my strategy, but that's not to say that it would be wrong. You're
Right.
certainly much better off doing that than not accumulating at all.
Right. Well, and what I like to remind people is that, we all work for a living, and it is rewarding every now and then to do some spending on things that aren't required, like gas and property taxes and your home mortgage. It's fun to go out and buy a new pair of shoes or whatever, but I always like to tell people, when you buy physical silver or gold, you get that same thrill when it's delivered to you, but it's a tangible, hard asset, and it's actual wealth, and you can sock that away. And my daughter teased me the other day. I had a little delivery of silver, and she said, "Why do you keep buying that?" She doesn't understand, and none of these young people do, I don't think. But they'll get it sooner or later. And I reminded her that I said, "You ever seen that show Hoarders?" She's like, "Yeah." Well, when those people finally leave this planet, they don't have anything but junk and trash and garbage they've accumulated to leave their family. I'm going to leave you a lot more. And at the end of the day, that's what we're all trying to do. We're trying to protect ourselves and our families.
Well, you're right. And going back to, you talked about the Queen of England earlier. I want you to stop, because this is all about collateral. We all have to think about, what is the collateral that we need to have? What's going to put us in the best possible position? What the Queen of England has is dynastic wealth that is based on 3 parts. Number 1, real estate. I mean, look at how many castles and palaces and real estate. Look at how much real estate they own.
I think she's the world's largest landholder.
I think she is. Rare collectibles. So they've got the crown jewels and all of these rare works of art that they're rare. There's a finite amount of them, and the world agrees that they have quality. And gold. And gold supports the other 2, and you could actually do gold with all 3, because you can have a gold mine and you can have a rare coin as well as monetary gold. But those are real things. They've trained us against real wealth, which is, look at the collateral for that, right? It's not something that somebody has to dictate. That land you can grow food on, or you can do they can open it up to the public and generate income from it. There's lots of things that you can do with it. Those rare collectibles, well, there's always people with wealth. Even during the Depression here, think about Seabiscuit and that $100,000 purse. There's always people with wealth that want what nobody else can have. And then obviously the gold money, which can be used inside of the financial system, in manufacturing, in medicine, in art, in jewelry, I mean, everywhere. That's why it has that intrinsic value. What are you going to do with a stock? It's only used one place.
Right.
And that's why when this whole rush comes in, this next liquidity crunch that we're not going to see at the moment, because the global central banks are committed to creating a whole lot more fiat out there, because that's what everybody is demanding. but that means that the value of that stuff, even though it looks like it's going up, the underlying value is going down. They're destroying it because there's no limitations on that.
One last thing regarding that stock that you mentioned, one certificate, one share of stock. I would advise anybody listening to try this. Good luck. Try to take delivery of that stock certificate. Call your broker and ask him to arrange delivery of that stock certificate. What was possible back in the early 2000s is not possible today. You are going to get fought at every turn. It is extremely difficult to take delivery of your stock certificates, and there's a number of reasons for that, guys, not the least of which is much of what we're seeing is illusory. And you can take physical delivery, though, of gold and silver. And one way to do that is from my buddies at SD Bullion. You can click that banner at the top of SGT Report. I've known those guys for a long time. I trust them, but I've known Lynette for a long time now, too. And if you want to work with her over at ITM Trading, I suppose you could just give her a call directly. Is that right, Lynette?
Well, no, but I have this wonderful team of strategy specialists, and really probably I'd say the difference between SD Bullion and ITM Trading is that even though we both deal in physical metals, so you take delivery of it, everybody here is trained in the strategy that I created for myself. So you're working with us, it becomes a long-term relationship where you're actually executing a strategy to support your specific goals and circumstance. That's what we like to do the best, is work with clients in that regard.
Okay, great. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We very much appreciate it. I say that all the time, but it's so true. And a special shout out to my patrons who are keeping me in the fight as YouTube and Google change the rules of the game in the middle of the game to try to filter truth out. But we're not going to let that happen. So for real news 24/7, you can come directly to the source, the antidote to corporate propaganda at sgtreport.com. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in and liking this information. We love you. God bless. Bye-bye.
I personally believe that Julie and Hassan will be very well looked after, and they will deliver him to President Trump. But let me tell you something now, they will not dare harm a hair on his head.